Angela Shen Hsieh is an entrepreneur, technologist, and designer, and previously ran the Data Innovation Unit at Telefonica and the Watson Analytics and Natural Language Artificial Intelligence products at IBM Watson. Trained as an architect, Angela is a builder at heart. She has applied that to business and entrepreneurship as the CEO and founder of 4 startups, including Visual.io, a venture-backed visualization software company. She has been named a top data science influencer by the Data Standard, a Fast Company Master of Design, and one of 10 cutting-edge designers pushing the limits of design by BusinessWeek. Angela holds 6 patents and a BA from Columbia University and a Master of Architecture degree from Harvard University. She currently lives and works in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she is working on an AI startup in the home design and furnishing space. I'm pleased to welcome Angela Shen Hsieh.
Thanks for that nice intro.
So, we have about a half hour. It's going to be a conversation. We're hoping to keep it fairly light, although the topic AI is, this is quite timely, I would say. And beyond that, at the end, I'd like to open it up. If you do have conversation topics or questions for Angela or I, we'd be glad to entertain them. So with that said, we'll get started. I'd like to start with a question that I think will help us segue into the topic, and that is, how did you, Angela, as someone who initially studied architecture at the graduate level, make your way into working on projects related to data and AI?
Well, I can assure you it was very logical. I'm an architect by training, and I actually came out of school at a terrible time in the economy. Was the best thing that ever happened to me, by the way, and started a clothing company. That was the first thing I did. I mean, I was trained in this master builder kind of education of architecture where, like Frank Lloyd Wright designed the clothes and the shoes that were worn in his rooms. So I thought I could design anything and didn't see any problem in applying it to clothing or business or whatever. But then eventually I got involved with technology and specifically with data visualization. So data visualization is actually really similar to architecture because architects don't build buildings. We actually make pictures of buildings. And so in the same way that we use these different kinds of drawing techniques, axonometrics and perspectives and plans and sections to be able to explain things about a building, that's kind of the approach that we took to data. So, how are people going to use this view of the data, understand it, and then be able to apply it in whatever they need to do with the data. So that's how I kind of ended up in data, and then data became analytics, and analytics grew into artificial intelligence. Also, I would say I just kind of followed what was interesting.
Yeah, this is fascinating. As we got to know each other in the past week or so, I found it interesting that someone that studied architecture yourself sort of made their way into UX design, whereas someone who studied sort of UX design and graphic design, myself, entered the world of architecture. I think that tells us all something about how design is so kind of interdisciplinary, but fortunately so valued in the 21st century, right?
Yeah.
So this is kind of the elephant in the room. Question 2, I'm sure many in this room at least some of you might have some fear as it relates to AI and design. So we did reach out to a few of you before the talk and received some of those questions. And several of you cited concerns related to plagiarism and ethics. So I'm wondering, Angela, what are your fears, if any?
I think I want to start by saying, like, what exactly is the fear? Like, what are we really afraid of? And I think it's change. But the pace of change is faster. There's just no doubt about it. There's like statistics about how we will have 7 careers in our lifetimes. So I'm definitely, up there on 7 or 8. And also that I used to use the statistic a lot in these talks about sort of the future of UX. But basically, people 65% of people right now will have jobs in the future that don't exist right now. So change is inevitable. And also, like, we as designers, like, aren't we supposed to like change? We're supposed to be agents of change. So I think the fear of change, we have to kind of put that in context. I mean, the desktop publishing was a big threat to our profession. Dan and I were chatting. I was saying when I was at the GSD at Harvard that I had lots of, people love the whole craft of things like typesetting, and they used to go to the Hasty Pudding building and go in basements and, just fondle the typesetting equipment. And now we don't, maybe a lot of you don't even know what typesetting is. So what do I fear? The thing I fear right now, particularly with generative AI, is the lack of attribution. So if you don't know, our whole internet model is on, free content creation, and then people can monetize it in different ways. And that is, through an attribution of search engines like Google. And so that is really worrying to me, especially because I felt like we were just at a point, particularly sort of coming out of the pandemic, where a lot of people had kind of changed their jobs and kind of took a different approach to like passion projects. And it seemed like you could almost make a living doing something that you love. And so I'm going in the direction of universal basic income, by the way, but forget that. Yeah, if you could do something that you love and make money on it, but it's all requires attribution, and that's the biggest thing that I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of the business models. I am a techno optimist, though. Maybe a political pessimist, So, and maybe a little bit, business, a little pessimistic about what business will do, but ultimately, I feel like those things work themselves out. Also, data is the key to AI. So, there's a lot of attention on algorithms, but if you don't have good data, your models won't be sound. So it's really all in the data. They're going to focus on the data.
Excellent. And I can attest also to, as someone who initially studied design in the 90s, this fear of even the computer itself, that this was going to somehow diminish our profession. And lo and behold, the opposite has somehow happened, where design is growing in new ways, and we're designing for new platforms. And So, yeah, I think it's a good answer. And there's a lot to sort out, which we can't sort out here. But yeah. So the next question is, where and or how can designers leverage AI? How do you see the role of the designer possibly changing as a result of new technologies such as AI?
Yeah, so this is a big question. So some practical examples. A/B testing. We don't do A/B testing anymore. Computers can do A, B, C, D, Z, 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 Z testing, and so that's speeding the cycles of feedback, which is great, because that speeds the cycles of iteration and value creation. But AI, particularly like deep learning, if you know anything about this, it does not. It can tell you what. It can tell you that this ad was, seemed to appeal to this audience at this time of day in these contexts, whatever. But it doesn't tell you why. Deep learning doesn't work that way. So you still need the interpretation, and again, the iteration. I think that what I see is that designers have a huge role in fostering collaboration. When I was at IBM, we implemented IBM design thinking. So this is like a ginormous company saying, "Oh, we forgot about design. Here's a cookbook, for creating design." But what I found is that designers so there was all kinds of things wrong with that. But what designers did become were the facilitators, or the orchestrators of getting all of the different voices in the room talking to each other. And this is absolutely critical for the future, because of the speed of change means that every company has to innovate constantly. They cannot ignore innovation. And so how does innovation happen, and how does it happen in old companies, and particularly in non-digital companies? That's a whole other thing. You need to get the most out of your people, because your people know the problems that need to be solved, and so how do you get the most out of the people that you have? How do you get those diverse voices talking to each other? And whatever you think about sort of design thinking, so I won't get into that rat hole, but I think of it as techniques to be able to pull out of the people the key key things that you need to address, and new ideas, and ideas build on ideas, and that, I feel, is becoming the role of the designer. Now, some of it ends up being a little bit of party planning, I will admit. But maybe that's part of it. Have a beer, have a nice breakfast, and get people kind of in the right mindset to be able to collaborate.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. And putting on that through an academic lens, it's, design could easily be seen as the interdisciplinary domain that brings other disciplines together to make almost anything, experiences, products, tangible, intangible. So
yeah,
I think that's fascinating.
I think design is the glue. I work in product design, and you need a common language to be able to get developers and business people and designers and now data scientists understanding what we're all doing and how it contributes to this, product that you're building. And I used to think of the design artifacts as kind of like the universal translator, because people can look at a design of something like a UX, and the developer goes, "Oh, that means I need this kind of stack." The business person goes, "Oh, I need a partnership with this kind of company." And when you identify problems in the product, if you've got these people working together, it's not like engineering has to pull the whole weight of solving, every problem, or that the UX has to pull the whole weight, or that the business has to pull the whole weight. You need to share the problem so that you can solve it. So you can solve it from many different perspectives. So you have many different hammers.
Absolutely. And, just even our ability to prototype and to create something that's tangible, that can be reacted to, versus just, talking about an idea versus seeing an idea. So yeah, absolutely. How about one more and maybe then open it up, the group? So in light of AI and other trends, I'm wondering, what traits do you think will be valuable for designers in, let's say, the next 20 years? There was a recent Fast Company article that suggested a few that included humility, curiosity, self-awareness, and empathy. What do you think of those? Or are there other ones that you would suggest?
No, I think those are, I think those are great. It's that right brain, left brain connection that's just super valuable in the world. I always think of, I was telling you the story about how in architecture school there were a lot of people who had real hard science degrees. And I finally kind of have a hypothesis of why. And it's because they kind of got bored with only getting to one answer. And in design, there's lots of answers. And that is key. So, for instance, right now, I mean, in product and technical product development and software, startups, lean startup. If you don't know, what it is, that is the prevailing methodology for bringing a new product, bringing a new business along, and it's based on hypothesis generation and validation. And it's like, what are your riskiest assumptions? And this whole methodology is really designed on speed, because in change, it's expecting change. Because in the old days, you could write up a business plan for 5 years and have a product development plan that was 1 year, and you started it, and then after 1 quarter, the whole context of the market and the business had changed. You'd learned things, but you couldn't adjust. So this is based on being able to do lots and lots of quick iterations. And this is something that designers really can power, because it's quick research cycles, it's quick testing cycles. It's pulling out that multiple answers to a problem. So identify a problem, and we've got a bunch of different possible solutions. And then how do we apply that? Because it's not really that sort of one-to-one. Here's a problem. Here's the solution. Here's another problem. Here's another solution. Here's another. That doesn't really add up to a really great product in the end, because you just got a whole bunch of features. So I think those kinds of, all of those kind of soft skills, but connected with actual production and actual data and analysis thinking. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I see a lot of younger folks are here. I lived through this sort of process that you described, and we used to refer to it as kind of the waterfall method.
Exactly.
And if you're not familiar with that, sort of what you described.
It's a bad word.
You pass it from one team to the next. Years would go by before, many things would actually come to, and now we hear about, lean and agile, and things are moving fast. And I think in what you say, they have to move fast. So with that, shall we open it up to the audience for questions? If anybody has any questions, we're glad to entertain them.
So I was really enjoying the idea of kind of designer as collaborator, the person who's bringing everyone to the table and pulling out the information, which will help drive a business forward, help identify those unique cases that generative AI may not come up with, especially kind of an unprompted or a poorly prompted version. But then I was also thinking about remote work, and if the new chief responsibility of a designer or design team is to be a party planner and bring people together, how does remote work affect that? Particularly when on the remote side, you're in front of your desktop most of the time, your best friend is your chatbot. Like, how do you convince people to come together for that?
Great question.
Well, I was just having this conversation actually yesterday with my team, because I'm the remote person. And there's lots of things there's lots of techniques you can do, but I would say apply your designer hat to designing a situation, a circumstance that can help that problem. When I was at IBM, essentially the CTO of my product that I was developing was in Canada. And what he used to do is he used to actually put me on a screen. Developers, they got lots of screens. So he used to actually put me on a screen in his office, and we'd be basically sitting there working next to each other. But what's really great is that people would come into his office in Ottawa and talk to him, and then he'd say, "What do you think, Angela?" And it, and I also experimented with all kinds of other devices and things to, for a while there was a lot of little robotic devices that could, mimic you being there in person. So but I do think it's really important, because it's really hard to have to get out the pieces that are important, but they don't rise to the importance of a meeting. Those water cooler.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we make light of it, with the party reference. But it's something about being face to face. How do we maintain that kind of opportunity for dialogue when we're not all in the same room? Another question.
So I really liked the last bit of the dialogue before the questions, when you talked about agility and lean and the pitfalls of waterfall. So I came up through the ranks of enterprise project management and kind of learned agility and have really been on a mission to apply that. And I work a lot with legacy enterprises, and this is kind of an open-ended question, but I'm curious, one of the challenges I run into is convincing leaders of aligning with newer ways of working, aligning with design thinking. I'm just curious if in your experiences you've encountered, how do you socialize to, bigger clients, bigger engagements, bigger enterprises, benefits of thinking differently, applying these methods? Because that's the challenge I run into is, go apply that to the teams. Teams can do that. But thinking about how do we realign the way the business thinks about being competitive in markets is kind of a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and it's ongoing. I feel like you really have to go back to value, and you have to be thinking about what does the client think. So one thing is that big companies can't rely on you having a, in the shower aha moment. So it's valuable to be able to explain a process that seems like it can relatively consistently create the creativity and innovation that you need. I mean, and that's also because design is very associated with creativity and creatives. So that sometimes can be a little bit of a problem when you're talking to big companies. But just it's like basic sales. Going back to what's valuable to them. Understanding that what you're to big enterprises, what you're selling to users is different from what you're selling to the people who write the check. Oh, it's a big one. Learned that the hard way.
Excellent. I think we have time for one more question, maybe back here.
Hi. I really liked the example that you gave about how we started with, typesetting and things like that. I teach at Lesley University, and an example that I like when students, they're all freaked out about AI and thinking we're going to graduate here with $1 million in debt and we're not going to get a job, right? But I always tell them the most recent example that I found, even just maybe 10 years back when Squarespace launched, I can't really remember the amount of time, but everyone was kind of freaking out oh, everyone can do this. Web designers aren't going to be needed. I don't know if anybody has ever seen a non-designer design one of those things, but they look terrible, right? So I often give them that example to say you can't take the human component out of it. You can't take the education of that person out of it. Do you have any other examples that you've run into? I'm sure you probably have a million, but are there any that stick out at the top of your head for things like that?
Well, I think you should know about these technologies, because in some ways, in some people's minds, they may be your competition. So, and I've seen lots of examples of using them. So, for instance, I use a survey tool to do customer research, and they have an AI button. So, of course, one day I pushed it. I just wanted to see what it did. And so it basically created a survey to answer, a question that I had. So I'll tell you the punchline is that I did not use any of the questions, but it was valuable because it did raise things that I didn't think of. So it enhanced the survey. I was talking to a company that does that creates virtual showrooms, furniture showrooms, and they used, I think they used DALL-E because they were going to a client. They're a startup. They were going to a client, and they needed to show something of what this virtual showroom would look like, and so they asked DALL-E. They had some pictures to go and have a conversation. The company did have its own architect who actually, designed the actual showroom, although it doesn't look that much different from the DALL-E examples that they originally went with. But to me, that's a way of accessing design that that they wouldn't otherwise have had the ability to. I also have a friend who designed her wedding dress using Midjourney, and she basically, what did she put in? She's Chinese, so she put in the traditional Mandarin collar dress, and then something crazy, and got these incredible sculptural kind of impossible to actually, execute. You couldn't actually build this dress, but the concept was there. So I think for idea generation, I would not personally. I don't think that core piece is really ever there. I mean, as we just heard, everything is kind of things are based on other things. So if you get a jump start and it takes you, then you add the human component, which makes it unique and different and applied. Remember, design at the core is really about problem solving, and so problem solving is a really important skill. So always remember to kind of come back to that, I would say.
I think that's a great answer. And, just to echo a couple of things, I don't think we should fear design becoming more democratized. Like in the past example that we gave about the desktop publishing revolution, and having more people interested in understanding design may be a good thing. And then the second piece, as a fellow educator, I've just been asking the students to think even more deeply about who they are. Like, it's okay to bring yourself into the work. It's okay to bring your cultural and social viewpoints into the work. That's what's going to result in what you said, like,
more humane design.
The same problem solved 10 different ways by 10 different designers really gets back to who they are. So I think we'll just have to keep pushing on that. And I think could be exciting. So I want to make sure I'm respecting time here. We're going to wrap it up. So thank you so much to Angela, Shen Hsieh,